The canyon wind howled like a morning spirit, sweeping red dust across the fading horizon. Tom Reed had been riding for hours, searching for strays that wandered from his herd, when he heard the faint cry. It was so distant he thought it might be the wind, but then it came again, human, desperate. He turned his horse toward the sound, spurring through the rocky trail, where cacti stood like silent sentinels. When he reached the narrow gorge, he saw her, a woman trapped beneath a pile of jagged stones, her face pale with pain, but her eyes fierce with life. Tom dismounted in an instant, tossing his reins aside and kneeling beside her. "Don't move," he said, voice steady, though his heart pounded hard. The stones were heavy, wedged deep around her leg. He tested one, feeling the weight, then used his shoulder to push it free. The effort tore skin from his palms, but he didn't stop. Each rock he moved brought a faint gasp from her, yet she didn't cry out. By the time the last one rolled away, sweat and dust streaked his face. "You're free," he whispered. She lay still, catching her breath. "I thought I'd die here," she murmured. Her voice was cracked and dry like the desert wind. Tom tore his bandana, wrapping it tight around her leg to stop the bleeding. "Not today," he said. Carefully, he lifted her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, and he felt the tremor of her heartbeat against his chest. "My horse is nearby," he said softly. She only nodded, eyes closing in exhaustion, as he carried her through the canyon toward the flicker of safety he knew he had to build. By the time he reached his small camp, night had fallen hard. Coyotes cried in the distance, and the stars shone sharp above them. He laid her near the fire, covering her with his worn coat. "You're safe now," he said, his voice low. She looked at him, eyes glassy in the firelight. "What's your name?" she asked weakly. "Tom Reed," he replied, pouring water into her hands. "And you?" For a long moment she seemed unsure if she should tell him. Finally she said, "Clara." The name fit her, simple, strong, and brave. Tom stayed awake most of the night, feeding the fire and checking her wound. He saw the pain written across her face, yet she never complained. Instead, she watched the flames, whispering something under her breath, words in prayer maybe, or to the stars. The wind had calmed, and the sound of crackling wood filled the silence. For a man who'd spent years alone on the trail, silence was nothing new. But this one felt different. There was warmth in it, a quiet that didn't hurt, like something healing beneath the dust and pain. When dawn came, the desert painted itself gold. Tom found his canteen almost empty, but he offered it to her first. "Drink," he said. She obeyed, her lips trembling as the water touched them. "You shouldn't have stopped," she whispered. "Men like you don't usually stop for strangers." He smiled faintly. "Then I guess I'm not like most men." She met his eyes, something flickering there, disbelief mixed with gratitude. "I was traveling with my brother," she said suddenly. "We were attacked. He told me to run, but I fell here." Tom's gaze softened. "I'll help you find him." Clara shook her head slowly. "He's gone. I saw him fall." Her voice broke and she turned away, hiding the tears that came uninvited. Tom said nothing. He understood loss. It was the only companion he'd known longer than his horse. He placed another log on the fire and looked at her gently. "You'll heal," he said. "Then you can decide where to go next." But inside, he already knew he wouldn't let her wander alone again. There was something about her presence, fragile but unyielding, that stirred a part of him long buried by years of dust and solitude. For the next few days, Tom cared for her as if she were family. He cooked beans over the fire, fetched water from the stream, and checked her wound, which began to heal beneath his rough bandages. Clara insisted on helping where she could, washing dishes, tending the fire, even brushing down his horse. At first he resisted, but soon he realized she needed purpose to keep her spirit alive. And somewhere in the quiet rhythm of their days, they began to talk, not about tragedy or loss, but about life, dreams, and what peace might look like beyond the canyon. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Tom found her sitting by the fire, humming softly. The tune was unfamiliar but beautiful, haunting in a way only old songs could be. "That's from my mother," she said when she noticed him listening. She used to sing it when storms came. Tom nodded. Sounds like it could stop a storm. She smiled for the first time since he'd found her. Maybe it just makes them easier to bear. He watched the firelight flicker across her face, realizing that in saving her, he had unknowingly saved himself too. By the 5th morning, she was strong enough to walk with a stick. Tom helped her take her first steps along the ridge, steadying her when she stumbled. Careful, he warned. The rocks here can be mean. She laughed softly. So can life, Mr. Reed. He smiled beneath the brim of his hat. When she reached the edge and looked over the vast desert below, her eyes filled with something he couldn't name. Awe, perhaps, or freedom. I never thought I'd see this again, she said. You gave me back the sky. Tom turned away, hiding the ache that came with her words. That night, as they prepared to leave the canyon, Clara sat beside him, watching the dying fire. I don't know how to thank you, she whispered. Tom shook his head. You already have. How? She asked. By reminding me there's still good left out here, he said. She looked down, her fingers brushing the edge of his coat draped over her shoulders. Then maybe that's why I survived, to remind you. When their eyes met, the silence between them was no longer empty. It was full of something they both understood, but neither dared to name. Hope. When dawn broke again, the world felt new. Clara climbed onto his horse, her legs still weak but healing. Where will you go now? Tom asked. Wherever the wind takes me, she said softly. But I hope it takes me somewhere near you. He smiled, leading the horse through the rising dust. Behind them, the canyon faded into memory. A place of pain turned into something sacred. They didn't know what the road ahead would bring, but both had learned one truth in the desert. Sometimes the strongest bonds are forged not by love's promise, but by survival's grace. The dawn came slow and pale, stretching its gold across the canyon's stone. Clara stirred beside the dying fire, her leg bandaged in layers of cloth Tom had torn from his own shirt. She winced as she sat up, but her eyes were brighter than before, alive, grateful. Tom poured the last of the coffee into a tin cup and handed it to her. Drink, he said, voice gentle but firm. She took it with trembling hands. You stayed all night, she whispered. He nodded once. Couldn't just leave you alone out here? Desert gets colder than death after dark. As the warmth of the drink settled in her chest, Clara studied the man before her. His face bore the lines of sun and struggle, the kind carved only by years beneath the open sky. You risked your life for me, she said quietly. Tom gave a small, dismissive shrug. Ain't no decent man leave someone to die alone. She smiled faintly at that. Not many decent men left in these lands. Maybe not, he replied, poking the fire with a stick. But I reckon we can still make do with the few there are. When she tried to stand, Tom moved to steady her. Her leg quivered beneath her weight, pain flashing across her face, but she refused to cry out. Easy now, he said. One step at a time. With his hand supporting her arm, she managed to take a few uneven steps. The desert breeze brushed against her hair, and for the first time since he'd found her, Clara laughed, soft, unguarded. Guess I'm not ready for dancing yet, she teased. Tom chuckled low. Well, that's all right. Ain't much dancing done out here anyway. They spent the next few days near his camp, waiting for her strength to return. Tom hunted jackrabbit and gathered cactus fruit, while Clara helped however she could, mending his torn saddlebag, boiling water, tending to the fire. In the quiet moments, they shared stories of who they'd been before the desert crossed their paths. She told him about her small home in New Mexico, her brother who taught her to ride, the night everything she knew turned to dust. Tom listened without interruption, his gaze steady. When she asked about him, he said simply, I used to have a wife once, buried her 2 winters ago. That night, under a blanket of stars, Clara watched him stare into the flames. His expression was distant, the look of a man who'd learned too well how to lose. You loved her? She asked softly. More than the open range, he said. But love don't keep you from the things life throws. She nodded, understanding more than she wanted to admit. Maybe it brings you to the things you need next, she said. Tom looked up at her then, his eyes catching the firelight. Steady, unreadable. Maybe, he said. Or maybe it just teaches you how to keep going. By the fourth morning, her limp had lessened. Tom helped her onto his horse, adjusting the reins gently. You sure you're ready to ride? He asked. She smiled. If I don't, I'll start to think the ground owns me. He grinned at that. All right then, Miss Clara. Let's get you home. They rode for hours across the vast plain, the land stretching endless around them, red rock, dry wind, and the soft hum of distance. Every mile they covered brought a strange ache to Clara's heart. She didn't know if it was the wound healing or the thought of leaving him behind. When they reached the settlement, the sun hung high, casting long shadows on the dusty street. Tom helped her dismount in front of the small doctor's shack. You'll be safe here, he said, his tone careful, as if he didn't quite trust the words himself. She looked at him, eyes shimmering. And you? He adjusted his hat, glancing toward the horizon. Got work to get back to. Cattle don't much like tending themselves. For a moment neither spoke. Then she reached for his hand, her fingers brushing the scars across his knuckles. You didn't just save me, Tom. You gave me back my faith in good men. He swallowed hard, tipping his hat. Well, ma'am, guess that's something worth keeping. She smiled through her tears, then turned toward the door. Before stepping inside, she looked back once more. You ever find yourself near Santa Fe? She said. There'll be coffee waiting. Tom's answer was a slow, genuine smile. I'll hold you to that. With that, she disappeared through the doorway, leaving him alone on the quiet street as the wind stirred the dust around his boots. For a long moment he didn't move, just stood there, staring after her, feeling something shift deep within his chest. Weeks passed. Tom went back to his ranch, back to the silence of his land and the rhythm of the cattle. But sometimes, when the wind carried the sound of distant laughter or a flicker of firelight, he thought of her, the woman he found beneath the stones, who smiled through pain and believed again because he stopped. The world was wide and unforgiving, but somehow it felt less lonely knowing she was out there, breathing the same dry air, looking up at the same stubborn stars. The memory of her voice became his quiet companion through long, empty nights. Years later, travelers in the region would still tell their story, of the cowboy who stopped when no one else would, and the woman who taught him that compassion could bloom even in the harshest lands. Some said they met again years after, in a small town near the Rio Grande, where a weathered rancher walked into a cafe and found a familiar smile waiting behind the counter. Others swore she'd sent him a letter that was never opened, buried beneath the dust of time. But the truth, like the desert, kept its secrets. Only the wind remembered.